Hi, my name is Merrily Parker. I own a quilt shop in Springfield, Missouri called Merrily We Quilt Along. I'm here today because it's basting week and I'm going to give you some tips and techniques on basting on a long arm. There are several different ways of basting depending on which type of long arm you have. If you have a non-regulated stitch long arm, you can baste by turning your stitch length down to a low number and then moving your machine kind of fast, like this. See how long the stitches are? If you have a single stitch machine, you can hold onto the threads before you start and take a single stitch as wide as a base that you want to do. When you get so far, you might want to reach and hold on to a previous stitch so that they don't pull out and tear your quilt top. The last way you can baste is if your machine has a basting function. This Vision 22 has the baste, so I can hit the go button and it will baste for me. How easy is that? There are several times you might want to do some basting on a quilt. The first time would be if you want to baste a quilt for a hand quilter. One way to baste a quilt for a hand quilter is to run your basting stitches about every 6 inches across your quilt. See how we did several different lines? And we would continue this all the way down the quilt. Or you might want to grid it for the hand quilter and put in your vertical lines. See how the grid is starting to form? So we would continue to roll the quilt, put in our horizontal lines, and then come back and put in our vertical lines for the quilting space that is available. Some long armers prefer to do the grid as they go along. So they'll come across, come down, come across, go up, so do you see how the grid is forming? And you would just continue this down the entire length of your quilt. Basting can be a time-consuming and physically demanding job. Your long arm professional can help in this quilting process, whether or not we do straight lines straight across the quilt, or if we do horizontal and vertical lines across the quilt, or we grid it as we go. The long armer can make the job simple. Basting takes a longer stitch than normal. If you are basting on specialty fabrics, such as a silk quilt, you will want to use a very fine thread and a smaller needle. Perhaps you will go down to a 3.0 or a 2.5 on a silk quilt. If you do not own zippered leaders where you can easily unzip a quilt and store it for future use, then you might want to consider basting your quilt and then removing it from your frame. This way, your basting will hold the layers of the quilt together so that they will not shift the next time you load the quilt onto the frame. Sometimes you'll get a quilt in that has a lot of space to show off your quilting. Maybe you haven't decided what you want to do in that area yet. So one thing you can do is baste across these long white areas. Then you can go into the quilt and do your stitch in a ditch around all the pieces and fill those in, and then come back out when you've decided what to do in these areas. Take out your basting and quilt in these lovely large negative spaces. Perhaps it's only a small part of a quilt, like in a Lone Star, where you have these large setting squares and these large setting triangles. You can do a simple basting stitch across it to hold it in place while you do your other quilting around that area. Then you can come back in, clip your threads, remove your basting, and add your lovely quilting. So it doesn't matter whether you're quilting a long arm, a mid arm, or a short arm. Basting is easy. See you soon.